Americans' approval of the president has ticked up since his last State of the Union. CBS News polling shows 45% of Americans approve of the job Mr. Biden is doing, but that's still down more than 15% from where he started. DNC senior advisor and former Louisiana Congressman Cedric Richmond joins me now. He also served as a senior advisor to President Biden and as director of the White House Office of Public Engagement. Cedric, thank you for being here. The political scientists tell us that the State of the Union speeches, no matter, they get covered a lot, but they don't really change any minds or stick with voters. And we also know Congress is split, which means progress will be difficult on future proposals. So given that, what is the State of the Union for?
Well, it gives the president an opportunity to talk directly to the American people. And in this chance, he gets to remind the American people that unemployment is at its lowest rate since 1969, that he's created more jobs than any president in his 2 years than most presidents do in their 4 years. He gets to talk about all of those accomplishments, which people didn't think he can accomplish in an infrastructure bill, beating the gun lobby and enacting sensible gun reform. And then he gets to talk about what the next few years will be about. And part of that will have to contrast with the fact that he's building the economy from the bottom up and the middle out. And Republicans are, again, one, obstructing progress, but two, doubling down on the fact that they want to raise taxes on the middle class, at the same time giving the top 1% a $3 trillion break.
So the challenge that always happens with these speeches, though, is a president comes up and lists all the achievements, and the public, which in this case still has a very dim view about the state of the economy, thinks you're trying to tell me something that I know from my lived experience doesn't exist, and that doesn't necessarily help a president who tries to make this case.
Well, no, the president gets to tell people that inflation was a real problem. Inflation has decreased the last 6 months straight, and that his economic plan is growing. We don't ignore the fact that we had a real inflation problem, and it's a cause of not only the pandemic, Putin's war, but it's also the fact that we came out of the COVID-19 in a decent economic place through his plan.
The president has been spending a lot of time on the road talking about what has already passed. Given that Congress is split, chances for success for future programs is dim. Should a president with limited energy spend more time talking about what he has done and reminding people about that, or spend a lot of energy trying to sell things he would like to do?
President Biden can do both. He has a very capable asset in Vice President Harris, and they can do both. Look, no one thought that he would pass the infrastructure bill, but he did. Nobody thought he would pass gun reform, but he did. Nobody thought he would reduce child poverty in this country by 50% in his first year, but he did. And he keeps on delivering for the American people, at the same time drawing a contrast of what's at stake with Republicans. So if you want to see what he's going to do, then look at what he's done. And the infrastructure bill he passed with bipartisan support.
Let me ask you about—
And that's what you're saying is going to take in the future.
Let me ask you about those accomplishments. You've named them. I won't repeat them. Why then did Democrats in the AP poll, only 37% of Democrats want President Biden to run for re-election? The Washington Post poll, I believe, has a similar number that's even lower. Why don't Democrats love all of these things that you've been talking about?
Democrats do love them, and that's part of the reason for the State of the Union, so that you can remind people of the progress that has been made. And look, there's no doubt Americans have been busy busting their tails to keep a roof over their head, clothes on their back, and food on the table. They've been working. They haven't been paying attention necessarily to cable news networks, nightly news, because they are focused on the family unit. And so this gives us a chance to tell the American people what it could have looked like, what it looks like, and what it would look like under Republican control, and an irresponsible, reckless Republican majority in the House that's willing to default on this country's debt. So all of those things are why State of the Unions are so important.
Can you run for re-election with numbers like that?
Absolutely, you can run for re-election with numbers like that. Look, no one thought he was going to win in the first place, but he did. And I expect that if he runs again, he'll win. And the president has said that's his intention to run in public. I don't have a reason to doubt that. The DNC is prepared for his re-election. and he'll make a decision soon. And when he does, remember, it's a race between two people. It's not versus the almighty. It's versus the alternative. And what we see on the other side, we're ready and willing to compare our record against.
Cedric Richmond, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me.